This is part 2 of number 333, said to be the most haunted house in Britain. Just to recap, William Grave wanted to become a homeowner at the age of 19. He earned a good wage as a car salesman and was still living at home with his parents. So he and his then girlfriend went looking for a suitable house, which they soon found. A 3-bedroom semi-detached that was perfect for them and at the right price. After moving in, things took a sinister turn as they were plagued with hauntings, the main one being an elderly spirit named Mrs. Tompkins, who had moved into the house in the 1930s when it was a new council house and died in it many years later. There was only her and one other previous owner before William moved in. At the end of part 1, William and a group of his friends were watching TV when they heard strange heavy-booted footsteps going along the hallway outside the living room door. Then up the stairs before finally going into the bathroom where someone or something slammed the bathroom door shut. So all 4 of the men felt a mixture of fear and fascination at these events. After a lot of discussion, William reluctantly agreed to go upstairs and investigate. He paused for several moments before reaching the bathroom door. He pulled the handle down and pushed the door open. Much to his relief, there was no one there. He returned downstairs and they went back to watching the TV, certain that the strange events were over for the night. However, several hours later, Darren suddenly urged William to pause the TV again. As soon as he did, all 4 of them could hear the footsteps once more. This time they appeared to be pacing back and forth on the landing. The group listened to the footsteps for several minutes before Darren suddenly called out, "Stop this now, you're freaking me out." To everyone's surprise, the footsteps stopped immediately. As the years went on, several different people lodged at the house with William and the strange events continued. By 2012, Alan was renting the smaller bedroom and Brundon was renting the larger back bedroom. William was now working most weekends and he would spend his only day off, which was a Friday, playing golf with his dad in the day before meeting friends at the Bow Chief Hotel in the evening. It was during one of these Friday evenings at the hotel where he met his future wife, Grace, who was the manager of the bar. After being a couple for several months, Darren invited them for a night out at a new casino that had just opened nearby, with him and his wife Lisa. The 2 couples had a great night, but as they returned home, things took a strange turn, at least for Grace and William. After getting into a taxi, it was agreed that, as William lived nearer, they would drop him and Grace off first. When they arrived at number 333, while William was still paying the driver his share of the fare, Grace got out of the taxi. As she did so, she looked over to William's house. A moment later, she asked William, "Who is the lady in your house? I thought everyone was out for the evening." William stepped out of the taxi and asked what she meant. She pointed to the upstairs front bay window and said, "Who's the old lady in your bedroom window?" No matter how long William stared at the window, he couldn't see anyone there, but he knew exactly who Grace had seen. He did his best to dismiss the incident, and when Grace looked up at the window again, she said the lady was no longer there. Once inside and trying to sound as casual as possible, William asked Grace what the old lady she thought she had seen looked like. She said she was quite old, with short grey curly hair, wearing a cardigan, and her arms were stretched out leaning on the windowsill. She then added that she was looking directly at us as we got out of the taxi. Of course William could have guessed what she looked like. He knew exactly who Grace had seen. The apparent presence of Mrs. Tompkins. As the couple's relationship developed, William would spend several nights during the week at Grace's house, which she shared with her 7-year-old son Elliot, while Grace would usually spend the weekend with William at number 333. By this time, Grace had gone back to hairdressing, her preferred career, which meant she had almost all of her evenings free. On one particular evening, she had arrived at William's house after working late, and the couple decided to share a bottle or two of wine and order a pizza. They eventually made their way to bed, where William quickly fell asleep. An hour or so later, however, Grace woke him. It was clear to him immediately that she was panicked over something. She then stated that there was someone downstairs, and it sounded like more than one person. William quickly reached for his phone and sent a text to Alan and Brandon, wanting to know if they had returned home early. Both sent a text back straight away. Alan was still at the bar where he worked, having staff only after hours drinks, and Brandon was spending the night at his girlfriend's house. William then peeked out of the front window to see if there was any type of activity outside the front of the house. Then the sounds of footsteps returned. William said the footsteps sounded like two people in heavy boots, pacing from the kitchen into the front room, then back again. They were so loud and clear, William suspected that those making them wanted to be heard. Cautiously, William made his way out of the bedroom and onto the landing. He was careful to step over the loose floorboard so as not to alert whoever was downstairs. Then, when he reached the living room, the footsteps suddenly stopped. He reached for the handle of the living room door, and after taking a breath, he pushed the door open. As soon as he walked through the door, he could sense the buzzing sound in the air before he heard it. He quickly realised that the plasma TV was on, even though he always switched it off before going to bed. Something he was certain he had done that night as well. He quickly made his way to both the front and back doors. Both were locked and secured. He returned to the living room and switched the TV off, then returned to bed and told Grace what he had found. Although she was happy there was no one downstairs, she was deeply disturbed by the footsteps, as well as the fact that the TV had seemingly come on of its own accord. Neither slept much for the rest of the night. It wouldn't be the last experience Grace would have in the property, nor would it be for William. Alan and Brandon both moved out in early 2013, and William once more was the only person at number 333. It was also around this time that his relationship with Grace came to a temporary end. William had purchased a hair salon and put Grace in as manager. Although he was still working at the car dealership, he found himself spending more and more time involved with issues at the salon, which made any problems between him and Grace worse. By the end of the year, William had yet another housemate, a 25-year-old woman named Sadie, who he had been introduced to by a mutual friend. She moved into the larger room at the back of the house, and not long after, William and his friends decided to have a small welcome party for his new lodger. The party started without incident and went on until the early hours of the following morning, at which point only William, Sadie and a friend of William, Seth, left the party. Seth, however, was unable to get a taxi and asked if it would be okay if he slept on the settee at William's house, which William agreed to. He told Seth he wanted a lie-in, so he would leave the keys in the door so Seth could let himself out and not have to wake him up. Later that morning, at around 9 a.m, William heard Seth slam the front door shut. He then went back to sleep. When he woke up again, it was after 11 a.m, and he immediately felt the hangover from the night before. He got out of bed and walked towards the bathroom. As he did so, he happened to glance down the stairs and noticed that the front door was slightly open. He ran downstairs, worried that he had been burgled, or an opportunist thief might have let themselves in and stolen his car keys. He looked outside and could see his car was still there. However, on the path was Sadie's handbag. The contents of it were thrown around. He ran back upstairs to wake Sadie, telling her that her bag was on the path and she should check nothing was missing. Despite her handbag containing her phone, money and a packet of cigarettes, nothing had been taken from it, and all the contents were accounted for, which only made the discovery even more puzzling. Why would someone enter the house, remove her handbag and then empty the contents on the floor without taking anything at all? William took the blame for the incident, stating that he should have gotten out of bed when he heard Seth leave and checked the door was locked. Eventually Sadie calmed down and the pair returned back to the house. What waited for them only disturbed them even further. Almost as soon as they entered the house, they saw 5 sharp knives sticking out of the wooden floorboards in the doorway between the living room and the kitchen. What's more, the knives had been driven into the floor and were a good 2 inches deep into the floorboards. Stranger still, and all the more disturbing, the knives were lined up in order of size and evenly spaced. Whoever or whatever was responsible for this, the act was very purposeful. Telling Sadie to remain in the living room, William carefully stepped over the knives and went into the kitchen. He could immediately see that the knives had been taken from the block on the kitchen side. One of the kitchen drawers had been pulled open, as had 2 of the cupboard doors. William returned to the living room and called Seth, angrily asking if he had played some kind of joke on them by lining the knives up in the living room and emptying Sadie's handbag on the path outside. Seth insisted that he hadn't, stating the handbag was not on the path when he had left, nor were there any knives stuck in the floor, even going on to stress that he had purposely made sure the door was shut when he left. William recalled that it was the slamming of the door that had woken him, and he apologised to Seth, realising that he wasn't responsible. These were, to this point, some of the most disturbing occurrences at number 333. There is no doubt about that. Sadie remained at the property for around 6 months. Then, in early 2014, she simply left without warning. William had arrived home from work one evening to discover she had gone, even leaving the majority of her things behind. What made this sudden departure even worse was she had left owing several months' rent. He eventually arranged for her family to pick up her possessions and once more found himself alone at number 333. Then he found a new housemate, Timmy, a friend he had known for around 10 years. Timmy knew about the strange activity in the property, but agreed to rent the larger room at the back of the house regardless. It was around this time that William's brother Darren temporarily moved into the house, taking the smaller room overlooking the front garden. He had regularly stopped over each Sunday, and one Sunday he announced that he and Lisa were having some troubles and that he was going to stay for the foreseeable future. The arrangement suited all of them just fine. They all got on well and would often spend time together enjoying a beer in front of the TV. William and Darren also regularly told Timmy of the strange things they had seen in the house over the years. However, Timmy would soon find himself at the centre of one of these frightful episodes. One afternoon, Timmy arrived home early from work and found he was the only person in the house. He had to rush to the bathroom, and while sitting on the toilet, just staring ahead at the door, things took a strange and unsettling turn. As he looked ahead of him, he noticed the light cord that hung just down in front of the door was being pulled away from the wall as if by an invisible hand. It then began to spin around in the air several times before something sent it crashing into the wall. Unnerved, Timmy finished in the bathroom and quickly made his way downstairs, where he sat anxiously waiting for the others to arrive. He told them what he had experienced, and of course, neither of them doubted him for a second. Another unsettling incident took place several weeks later, this time when Timmy was away for the weekend. William was drinking beer and had a takeaway in front of the TV before going to bed, and Darren had gone out for the evening, expecting to be home late. He eventually walked through the front door a short time before 4 a.m. Instead of going straight to bed, he decided to have just one more beer. As he made his way to the kitchen, he noticed something moving near the window. He turned in the direction of the movement and saw a bright white shape moving around outside in the garden. Darren was now fully alert, thinking the figure could be a potential burglar. Whatever it was coming closer to the window. He continued to watch, moving as close to the window as he dared. Then the figure outside became crystal clear. He found himself looking at a ghostly apparition in the form of an elderly lady floating towards the window. Darren had heard William describe Mrs. Tompkins on multiple occasions and was more than certain that this was the lady he was looking at. He continued to watch as the figure suddenly came to a stop. It then turned and looked straight at him. He later said that he was certain that this figure was not just looking in his direction, but was fully aware that he was there looking out of the window. After a minute or two, the old lady turned around and began walking once more, eventually disappearing through the wall of the next door neighbour's extension. At this point, Darren found himself crouching down by the kitchen table, quite literally frozen with fear. He wasn't quite sure how long he had remained there before he finally reached for his mobile phone and called William's number. To begin with, William was annoyed at Darren for waking him up. Darren, though, ignored his brother and simply told William to come down here quick. William made his way to the kitchen, fully expecting Darren to be pulling a drunken joke. When he discovered Darren crouching near the table, clearly in fright, he became immediately concerned. He eventually managed to calm him enough for Darren to tell him exactly what had happened and what he had seen, and from the description Darren gave, William was also certain that his brother had seen Mrs. Tompkins. From this point, it seemed the curious goings-on and unsettling activity increased, both in intensity and in regularity. At around the same time, William restarted his relationship with Grace, who began to spend more and more time at number 333, and she would also witness some of the bizarre events. One evening, while she and William were in bed, and with a friend of theirs, Ian, spending the night on the living room settee, they suddenly heard what sounded like footsteps walking along the garden path. They both listened as the footsteps, clearly getting closer, reached the front door, at which point they suddenly stopped. Then, much to the pair's shock, a moment later, they heard the sound of a voice whispering, "Let's go round the back." On hearing this, William got out of bed and walked over to the window. He peered outside, but couldn't see anybody. He quickly made his way downstairs to investigate further. When he arrived at the living room, he found Ian sitting wide awake in one of the chairs, with a look of sheer fright on his face. He whispered to William, "Who was that?" William responded that he didn't know, but both men were certain they had heard footsteps and then a voice coming from outside. None of those at the house slept much for the rest of the night. Another hair-raising event occurred several months later. On the night in question, another of William's friends, Bob, was staying over at the house on the settee. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke. A moment later, the living room door leading to the kitchen suddenly swung open. Bob nervously got up from the settee and walked into the kitchen to see if anyone was there. There wasn't. A few seconds later, he returned to the living room. Then, without warning, the TV suddenly burst into life. He scrambled around for the remote so he could switch it off, but was unable to find it. Then, as suddenly as it had come on, it switched itself off again. As 2015 moved on, William found himself alone at the house once more, with Timmy having moved out and Darren returning home. However, as his relationship with Grace grew stronger, she began to spend more and more time at the property. During Christmas of 2015, she happened to be on her own at the house one day while William met some friends for a Christmas drink. After spending most of the day watching Disney films, At around 9:30 p.m, she got up and made her way to the downstairs toilet. On her way, she glanced out of the kitchen window. To her shock, there, outside, was an elderly lady, almost glowing white, standing in the garden, looking directly at her before fading into nothing. These kinds of encounters continued. However, Grace was seemingly undeterred by them and moved in permanently around a year later, in early 2017. Not long after, looking to turn the 3-bedroom property into more of a family home, the couple began renovations, which included adding an extension on the back. Much like other cases of haunted buildings from around the world, the renovations appeared to make the activity grow in intensity, as if the resident spirits at number 333 were far from happy with the home improvement work. Along with the strange footsteps that were heard regularly in the house, apparitions and mysterious shadow figures became more commonplace. The renovations to the property took almost 2 years, but by 2019 they were complete. The intense activity, though, continued, with Elliot, Grace's son, witnessing the curious goings-on for the first time. One day, out of nowhere, he burst into the living room, clearly annoyed, asking why they kept calling his name. William and Grace, who were watching TV at the time, were puzzled, claiming neither of them had called him. The young boy returned to his room, clearly still thinking the pair were playing some kind of joke on him. Then, around 30 minutes later, he returned to the living room, once more claiming he had heard them call his name. The couple insisted they hadn't. William began to worry that whatever presence was in the house had not only turned its attention to Elliot, but was purposely tricking him. Despite the strange activity, William and Grace married several months later. As they settled into married life, these strange events continued to unfold around them. The footsteps around the property continued to be heard, but they were now often accompanied by loud bangs and thudding sounds, seemingly coming out of the walls. It was these thudding sounds that eventually gave William the idea of using them in an attempt at communication with the entity that was haunting number 333. After hearing the strange sounds one evening, he suddenly asked out loud if there was someone there they should knock twice. Much to his surprise, 2 loud knocks sounded moments later. There was no longer any doubt something supernatural was present at the house. On 2 separate occasions in the summer of 2022, William allowed a paranormal team and a medium to investigate the house. One thing that was confirmed during the investigations is that there was more than one spirit present. Even more interestingly, and a detail that shows up in other cases of haunted houses, is that the location, not so much the house, but the location it's built on, contains some kind of portal that allows spirits to pass from their realm into ours. And this portal is not only open to the spirits of the people who once lived in the house, but allows any spirits to come through. It's the belief of many paranormal researchers and investigators that these portals or gateways exist all over the world. William has never seen Mrs. Tompkins himself, although a number of his friends claim to have seen her, and he has no reason to disbelieve them, because each one of them who saw the lady described her in the same way, even though they were never told what she looked like. He has no intention of leaving the house. Although the activity can be scary at times, no harm has come to anyone. The knife incident was creepy, and the only time anything remotely dangerous had taken place. But even that was not aimed at any people, and William has a feeling no harm will come to them, and they can live side by side with Mrs. Tompkins and any other spirits who visit. William knows a lot of people will say his story is faked, that he is saying it for fame and fortune. But I for one believe every word, and I just hope that he can live forever in his home, and the spirits will respect that it is his home as well as theirs, and they can all live happily side by side. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.